Every day, all over the world, billions of people are creating trillions of points of data, including you. GPS, photos, phone calls, emails, search history, credit cards, surveillance camera footage, AI prompts. Even our phones just listening to us. Now, we all know that companies use this data for semi-harmless things like marketing products to us, to pretty harmful stuff like digital price tags that change the price based on your data. But the ways we collect data and monitor people didn't arise naturally from the free market. There was some influence. We willfully ushered in a surveillance state in the name of corporate convenience, and the government is reaping the profits. Had the government introduced the systems that are commonplace now, the public would have rejected them decades ago. But package it as convenient new upgrades slowly over time from America's tech hub, and the people will welcome it. Today we're exploring how the CIA created modern-day Silicon Valley. Hi, I'm Crate13, and I started this channel to pay back debts I accrued in a illegal Vietnamese gambling hall. But I already explained what this video is going to be about, so let's get started. Nothing breeds innovation like competition, and there was no other competition in all of history like that between the US and the USSR. The Cold War gave birth to not only crippling anxiety to boomers, but also many of the modern technologies we use to this day. GPS and satellites were direct results of the space race, and the internet was designed so the government could still communicate with one another in case nukes did fly. But 1991 rolls around, and as flannel and grunge was hitting the scene, communism was out. The Soviet Union was no more, and all of a sudden, no more competition. We won! Hooray! But now we have an inflated defense industry and military-industrial complex. That was a major leg of the US economy. And it lost a lot of purpose, basically overnight. Not to mention that it made a lot of very powerful people even more rich and powerful, but that's besides the point. Defense budgets were beginning to drop, and members in Washington were beginning to panic. The agency most negatively affected by the Cold War ending was the CIA. They were officially formed in the aftermath of the Second World War, specifically to counter the Red Menace on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And now that their foe was defeated, they were at biggest risk of falling down low in the funding charts. So the CIA hatches a new plan for relevance. Turn their mass surveillance tools on the US public that were designed for the Soviets. Now, they were already doing this, but after 1991, it would drastically increase. But not specifically from the government sector, at least not yet. They moved the biggest technological advancements from the Pentagon to California. With the adoption of computers becoming commonplace in workplaces and homes all over America, new advancements could spring up faster from the private sector. So the CIA sees this and wants a piece of the pie. So in 1999, they found In-Q-Tel. This is a non-profit company that would fund new and developing businesses in the tech sector, primarily in San Francisco. And importantly, these early investments would go on to give the CIA some of the largest shares of America's most powerful and largest companies. And these large shares would give the CIA influence on what direction the company would go and what technologies they would develop. Imagine you're an entrepreneur. You've developed a computer that can analyze massive amounts of data at once. Your technology could potentially help intelligence agencies find patterns hidden in millions of pieces of data. But you don't have access to the CIA. You don't even know what problems intelligence agencies are dealing with. And lastly, the government doesn't even know if your technology works or not. That's where In-Q-Tel steps in. The organization could invest in promising companies and help connect emerging technologies with government needs. And some of these companies would go on to become extremely important. One of the most famous examples would be the company Keyhole. Keyhole developed technology that allowed users to interact with the enormous amounts of geographic and satellite imagery. In-Q-Tel invested in that company. And in 2004, Google acquired Keyhole. Its technology would eventually become part of Google Earth. Think about how strange that is. Technology developed by a private company, supported by an investment organization, controlled by the CIA, eventually became a consumer product used by billions of people every day. I'm sure the CIA would have no alternative or negative motives for having a photorealistic map of the entire world, including American neighborhoods and streets. I can't think of a single reason to be concerned by that. But Keyhole wasn't the most consequential In-Q-Tel investment. That distinction belongs to another company. A company that's recently been receiving a lot of publicity. In 2003, Peter Thiel and several other investors founded Palantir. First, let's give a little background to Peter Thiel himself. Thiel co-founded PayPal in 1998 and served as its CEO before the company was acquired by eBay. But after September 11, 2001, Thiel began thinking about a problem that had nothing to do with online payments. What if the same technology PayPal used to detect financial fraud could be used to identify T-words?
That if them Terrys is gonna try something up in here today like the bounce boogie and bump, we got this shit on lock.
The basic idea was deceptively simple. PayPal was dealing with enormous amounts of information, transactions, accounts, patterns, suspicious activity. The intelligence community was dealing with something much larger: people, communications, travel, financial records, countless other fragments of information. The problem was figuring out how all those fragments fit together. In 2003, Thiel and his co-founders created Palantir to tackle exactly that problem. The company's mission centered around something that intelligence communities had struggled with for decades. How do you make sense of enormous amounts of information? Intelligence analysts might have access to large amounts of data. The problem wasn't finding it, it was connecting it. Palantir built software that was designed to organize, integrate, and analyze massive amounts of data sets. And early on, the intelligence community became interested, so In-Q-Tel invested. The relationship helped demonstrate something important. The CIA didn't have to directly create all of its technology anymore. It could directly partner with a company who's building this technology in the private sector. Importantly, away from federal oversight. And with this technology, they can use it for a plethora of national security means. Palantir would eventually become one of the largest military and government contracting companies. Its software has been used by military and intelligence organizations, while the company has also expanded into commercial industries. And Peter Thiel would become one of the most influential figures at the intersection of technology, government, and politics. Don't believe me? Go down the rabbit hole on Vice President J.D. Vance. After graduating from Yale Law School, Vance joined Mithril Capital, the venture capital firm co-founded by Peter Thiel. Vance has described Thiel as an important influence on his thinking about technology, business, and public policy. The two developed a long-term professional relationship, with Thiel being a self-described mentor to Vance. When Vance ran for the U.S. Senate in Ohio in 2022, Thiel contributed more than $15 million to the super PAC Protect Ohio Values, which supported Vance's campaign. That was one of the largest individual political expenditures in that election cycle and helped raise Vance's national profile. All this culminating in Donald Trump picking someone who hadn't even been in the Senate for a full term as his vice presidential candidate out of nowhere right after the attempt on his life. Now, am I suggesting that the CIA used In-Q-Tel to get a stranglehold on Silicon Valley, ultimately using their influence to get their hand-picked candidate in position to become the president of the United States? No, that would be insane to suggest. But back to the main topic. Palantir represented something bigger than a single company. It represented the beginning of a new model. Silicon Valley wasn't merely supplying the government. It was becoming a part of the infrastructure through which national security was operated, and its leaders were jumping back and forth across the political aisle. Mark Zuckerberg went along with the Biden administration and cracked down on free speech hard when asked to, and yet he was standing right next to Donald Trump at his inauguration. These people have no principles other than the accumulation of their own power. But this new relationship isn't universally welcomed in Silicon Valley. Inside the valley, some employees have begun directly questioning if their companies should be working directly with the government and military. One of the biggest controversies involved Google's participation in Project Maven. The Department of Defense launched Project Maven to use artificial intelligence to analyze imagery. Google became involved, and some Google employees objected. The controversy eventually became a major debate inside the company over the ethics of artificial intelligence in military applications. For critics, it represented something concerning. Silicon Valley had spent decades presenting themselves as fundamentally different from traditional military contractors. Now, their technology was being directly incorporated into national security operations. For supporters, however, the argument was completely different. They believed that if America was going to compete technologically with adversaries like China, American companies couldn't simply abandon national security. The debate wasn't necessarily around if the government would use this technology, it was over who's going to control it, and under what conditions would it be used. And then something more interesting began to happen. A new generation of companies began appearing. Companies that weren't traditional defense contractors, but they weren't traditional Silicon Valley startups either. Anduril, Palantir, Scale AI, other companies working on autonomous systems, artificial intelligence, data analysis, and defense technology. The old distinction between Silicon Valley and the defense industry is beginning to disappear. A startup could raise venture capital, build an AI system, and within years, be working with some of the most sensitive problems facing the United States military. The venture capital world itself was becoming increasingly more interested in the military space. And the reason is straightforward. Technology had become national security. Cybersecurity is national security. Artificial intelligence is national security. Semiconductors are national security. Satellite networks are national security. Data is national security. The very movement of people, not only out and about, but in your very home is national security. And these companies that are building these technologies are no longer on the edge of power. They're becoming directly a part of it. Well guys, I hope I didn't make you too paranoid with this one. If you enjoyed this video, go watch the video about how all these problems began to start in the 1990s. It's a pretty good one of my personal favorites. But if you want to help me out, like this video, hype it up, maybe comment below. If you want to take it a step further, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you still want to go a little bit further, join that channel membership, buy some merch. I have this exact shirt for sale. If you join the channel membership, you get access to the Discord and your name featured right here with all these beautiful people. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed whatever food you decided to eat or whatever poop you decided to poop when you sat down to watch this video. I'm Crate13, and I hope you have a blessed day.